Hey guys, I know art education is extremely expensive. As someone that's been in debt that took 20 years to pay off, was well over $70,000. I'm here hopefully to shed some light on, some information, ease your mind, and of course, save you some money. This is information I wish I had, well over 20 years ago when I was about to embark on my art and my creative journey. So the four big categories I'm looking to cover today is more on portfolio development for 2025. That includes concept art and viz dev, maybe a little bit of illustration. We'll be looking at higher learning and different approaches to take for that. We'll be looking at networking and networking strategies, and of course some stuff on job readiness. Is a job for you? What kind of job? What kind of position or role could you fill? But yeah, a lot of information. There'll be plenty of examples, easy to follow notes, and with that said, let's get into it. So throughout this whole series, we have mentioned on more than one occasion tips and strategies to build a current portfolio, for 2025, and what some of the expectations are, what are some of the necessary components of that, and how those components should be presented. And we're going to continue that right here today because it's a lot of information just for any one video. So we're going to be talking about, to kick us off, strategic portfolio development, right? We're going to talk about curating things. We're going to talk about focusing on studio ready assets and how we can implement, of course, various types of feedback and when. So on this page, I've basically outlined a lot of personal work, some professional work of mine as to like what to do and what to clearly not to do in many scenarios. Not all. This is not a be all end all, right? But essentially what column A is just a collection of pretty pictures, pretty sketches that I would make. And I'm just labeling them as pretty is because I tried to make them look okay. And there was nothing else besides that. And this is a trap that I fell into, in like 2014-ish when I was just trying to make aesthetic pictures. This is a trap that's very common that I see even current students falling into, many, many years later today, is they just try to make a rendered picture, like a picture that looks aesthetically pleasing, that is essentially kind of pretty on the eye. It's eye-catching. And I do think having some eye-catching pieces in a portfolio is certainly valid, and still great to show some technical expertise, but they're by all means one of the least important factors, at least if you're looking to break into a creative field as a junior artist. The main thing here, of course, is we want to make sure the work is ready for the next part in the production pipeline or the next part of the team, and that's usually the 3D modeling team, right? We want to help the 3D models with our designs, and that's where a large part of these images are, right? Like they can't really help a 3D model with team. They might be okay in like a blue sky sort of pitch, right? Of the part at the very beginning of a project where you just come up with like a bunch of inspirational images to kick a project off and maybe to communicate a few ideas. But that's such a small aspect of production. You would not want the bulk of your portfolio, for example, to be made up of these kind of mood shots. You'd want to basically have many pages of clearly and cleanly laid out props, and iterations on those, variations on those as well, how you can break apart the textures, what do the shaders indicate and mean, in many of these instances. It definitely helps if these are relatable props and objects as well, or maybe environmental or characters, something that is understandable, right? So like that really far-reaching abstract stuff from fantasy and sci-fi is fun to make. It can look cool, but it's too much for a lot of junior artists because you're just communicating a lot of information that's not really measurable, right? Like it's like, who's to say this bit of sci-fi is right or wrong, like or fantasy or high fantasy? You just simply can't. So the key is to have things in your portfolio that would be a lot more measurable by our own human standards. They're relatable, they're understandable. Those are the key words there. And then, of course, can your design solve problems? So like, for example, right, if we're designing like a little communication base, okay, here's one idea for that. Can we actually break that idea down into many smaller little subcomponents, parts, and or kits that could be built in a very distributable sort of way to like the production team, that like, okay, we can make one wall, one window, have a few variations on those, and then be able to build, exponentially speaking, a large quantity of resources from that. And this is pretty much the opposite of what I see a lot of students and students that are applying or showing me their work, trying to look for work, is they do not show this sort of thing. The work, in many cases, the work is scattered all over the place. They want to show you everything they know, everything they think they know. We need to know what the shape design is. We need to know if that's consistent. We want to see where we don't need texture. Like, do we really need full texture on a model sheet? No, not necessarily. Flat colors would be perfect for something like that. Does the work lack intention and pure design? Like, is it just a thing for the sake of it? Or does the work simply just following a trend? Something like a popular tutorial, for example. A lot of times, we just need to resist over designing, right? And a fantastic way to do that is just to keep things real, just to keep grounded. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for a lot of things we're designing. Like, if I need to design camping gear or a set of trees and mangroves for this jungle level, do I need to redesign what that kind of tree is? No, not necessarily. I just need to basically communicate what that could look like for this project, for this style. And so a large part of this is like looking at our work and just curating it, removing the old things, replacing them with either better ones. You could group those together. It's just about curating the information so it's as easy to digest as possible from an art director's perspective. They will look for any excuse to not hire you. They're constantly getting bombarded with feedbacks and reviews, and especially when they're in a hiring position, we want to make the job easy as we can for them. So if I were to kind of sum up some things that you want to be mindful of when putting your portfolio together, of course, is to avoid pieces like this. So like the first one, just a pretty image for the sake of it. There's no context. There's no sense of scale. Sure, it could be visually interesting, but it's not doing anything to solve a problem for somebody else. Remember, as a production artist, we want to create art and curate our portfolio so that it solves problems. Like it shows parts of the world, it contextualizes that, it establishes something that's understandable and believable. And this image here does none of that. It was a color sketch I did at lunch once. Or even like from a figurative perspective, are we just doing, portraits upon portraits, and maybe we have a little bit of variety of those portraits, but are those character pieces, those portraits, able to solve problems from a production standpoint? Probably not. Let's break down expressions. Let's break down multiple hairstyles, multiple accessories this character could wear, multiple pieces of attire. Let's show work that makes sense in context, not just a collection of color sketches, or in like this case is exercises. You should not put a bunch of exercises in your portfolio. That's not really the place for them. That's for your Instagram, that's for your Kara, that's for Twitter, right? Probably not for your portfolio. Now, the next tier, I think these are good. These are really good real-world production examples from various projects. And I think they're good, right? They're great. They show an idea many times, right? Like we get multiple angles. They're correctly labeled to explain them. With the character one, we have like a full turnaround. We have many parts of that broken down. Yes, it could look more aesthetic. Yes, it could go further. But this is pretty standard. This is what's generally acceptable. It's not going to turn any heads, but it shows that you can do the work. Similarly, like this is a bit better than this one. We do have characters, we have an understanding. It is a great technical mood shot. And again, it's pretty standard. I think like if this were to be better, if we were to revamp this in a portfolio, right, we'd want to show a breakdown of what this exactly is. Maybe we could break down what these characters are doing and why they're here, right? It needs a bit more, but it's not terrible because at least it's competently done, and it's much easier to understand anyway, conceptually, from this one. So again, it's pretty good, but certainly could be improved. Now, the best examples, I've grabbed other people's because I think they even have much better examples than I have. visible on my portfolio is something like Ian Ho's here, right? This is very relatable. It's easy to understand. It takes something real world that we understand, like the 7-Eleven, and totally adds a unique sort of spin and storytelling elements to it. Again, this shows how you can add creative value to some existing property. And I don't think anyone's really conceptualized what a 7-Eleven could do, so something like that is a perfect opportunity in a project like this. Similarly to like what Raina Balderstone here. This is absolutely fantastic. There's so many pieces of character art, let me know if you're guilty of this, that are online where they just have like the flat gray background, or they're just like really standard statically standing characters like this. Okay, that's fine, but like any chance that you can doll up the presentation, any chance that you could add a little bit of characteristics and personal flourishes to the entire page without entirely making the text take over it, that would be ideal in my personal opinion. I think this is wonderful. We don't need a full render on a character. Like I said, flat colors over some competently done drawing, maybe with some iterations or callouts. That's ideal for a character design portfolio. And again, more on the some environmental and prop stuff. Something like this is great. I love this, right? Robin's tent. It's got a little bit of 3D integration, though you could probably barely tell because it was so worked. The nice presentation with the drawing, really good borders and page layout, and it communicates, even like what a rougher version of this looks like from the outside. And this really shows that continuity going inside these spaces and really breaks down that understanding of that with a consistent level of scale and detail. Again, just a fantastic piece for a portfolio that I think we could all strive to have more of, in 2025. Now, sometimes, like tonight, I end up working late, a little bit past the point of my exhaustion. I actually catch a second wind, and then I can't quiet my mind down. It wants to work and race tirelessly. But I do know it is important to stop because I gotta get an early start on the next day, and I want to feel refreshed, and I want to get going with my creative ideas as early as possible. So I'm constantly iterating on routines. I'm trying to build a sustainable cycle of mental wellness, and that's where Magic Mind comes in. I've been taking this late at night. It's been a game changer. Taking it has helped calm my mind and get me ready for sleep. But yeah, this has been pretty good so far. I can already feel a huge difference in the quality of my sleep after just 3 or 4 nights of taking it in a row. It's really helping keep my body and mind in sync. So Magic Mind has been a great tool for that. And one of the best parts is it's made with all natural ingredients. So you won't find anything addictive in it like melatonin. And now, for the first time, if you head to magicmind.com, you can save on a special bundle deal between their sleep and their focus packages. You just have to use my code at checkout, Tyler EJAN, and you can save up to 45% off. So just take a moment to reflect, of course, on your mental health. It's a huge aspect of being a creative, and certainly those pursuing being a creative professional. But yeah, there's no better time to start now, so make 2025 the year of your mental resilience. And so next up on today's agenda, I want to talk more about just advanced learning and mentorships. Something that's a lot more common nowadays than when I was kind of coming through my earlier days of training. So we're going to talk about strategies and things to consider when finding, the right mentor for you, how to engage and utilize feedback, and more on observing professional workflows. All right. So the big thing, right, with getting a mentorship or taking any kind of advanced classes, right, is that it's really about the feedback. It's about the critique, right? So it's really as artists and as individuals to really improve, we need some aspect of discipline, built into us. Nobody can really just put that there. We have to be responsible essentially for that side of it. Some kind of guidance, which you can find curriculums online. You can find videos like this on YouTube. That's what I'm doing now. I'm just providing some guidance. There's a lot of that already out there, right? There's no shortage of that. But it's the feedback, it's the critiques. that's where you are paying and getting a lot of value if you are seeking, something like a mentorship. You're paying for the person's time, you're paying for their expertise, and they're paying, for whatever they're kind of curating towards your experience. So there's a lot that goes into it. Of course, other aspects of this are, goal setting. They can help you set personalized goals. They can keep you accountable for this. Maybe just taking a class online is a way to help some of you stay accountable. But you do have to have that discipline, and you do have to have that accountability. Maybe there are, mentors out there that could help you work toward that. But like I said, you kind of have to really want that. You just can't hey, I'm going to take your class, make me responsible all of a sudden. It doesn't really work that way. Again, more about career development, personalized learning, and maybe emotional and professional support. Like my buddy Adam Duff, he runs a very different sort of mentorship than I do. He runs a very good one. And I know from students and the way he talks about it, he's one of those mentors out there that can really offer great professional and emotional support for a lot of artists. So there's something out there for everybody. And here's just a quick example of, the discipline, the guidance and the critique. So the student was already pretty good. A lot of students are, right? Art school and even mentorships, I don't think they're essential for learning basics. Things like drawing. Many programs do expect students to already have some sort of experience or some sort of foundation, especially with online resources like YouTube and other various affordable Patreons and Gumroads out there. There's a bazillion ways to learn some of those very early basics, and I would recommend to probably do so the cheapest way possible while getting that early mileage. And like I said, the true value with mentorships in school, online schools, is that feedback, it's networking, and it's exposure to new ideas. Because if we do self-train for too long, one of the downsides is that we're kind of working in an isolated vacuum, and we're making bad habits from mistakes that we didn't know we were making. So that's another huge aspect that you could fix with a class or a mentorship. And this is just one small example of how Tony Lee was already pretty good, and he had a lot of understanding under his belt, but a little bit of nudging from some additional guidance could really take his good idea, make it a fantastic idea, which would make it like a perfect kind of portfolio piece. And so if you're looking for any kind of feedback or any kind of class or mentorship, these are some things you would certainly want to consider. Because again, I run one, but I'm not for everyone. Adam runs one, and maybe his teaching style is not from everyone, like I said. And there's plenty of other people, like Hardy, Fowler's out there. There's a lot of great mentorships out there. That's one thing that kind of happened with the whole bubble bursting and the whole COVID is there's a lot more options, more so now than ever, for you guys that want to learn and develop your skills, right? So just consider your personal goals and needs. You could probably ask that mentor. You could reach out to kind of feel out your compatibility, or if like me and Adam and Hardy, we have a series that we do on YouTube, you could maybe get a sense of how we are as individuals, before then. And then there's practical considerations as well. I have people reaching out to me all the time. Hey, I'm in such and such time zone. Would meeting with me on certain days and stuff, would this ever be a problem? But it's the practical considerations, right? Do they have time? Do I have the ability to fully commit to this if I sign up? Some people, life happens and there's obstacles. So, how accessible is a particular person? Do you go online? Are videos required? Do I have to do it once a week? Is it twice a week? Is it twice a month even? There's literally options out there nowadays for everybody in every price point. That's why you just want to consider what is ultimately best for you, right? So you could start by thinking, okay, what are the outcomes of this? What do I really want to gain by working with such and such a person? What kind of feedback am I looking for? Is it just technical? Is it career strategy? Or is it creative exploration? Because I've worked with individuals on just either of those, and maybe sometimes a combination. Maybe some folks are just stuck technically and they don't know how to progress to that next tier of their work. Or maybe they already have really good work, but they don't know how to plan their strategy for their overall career, and so on and so forth. What would you want that mentor's role to be in your life, right? Do you want someone very hands-on? Do you want someone that's going to just gently guide you or give you a pat on the shoulder some days to keep you moving when you're stuck, right? There's a number of different opportunities out there. And then, of course, just reflect back at the end of the day at yourself. What proactive questions could I constantly bring to the table to ask a mentor while I'm essentially buying their time? What can I do to get better and implement that feedback? And am I ready to commit to all this as well? That's one of the saddest things that I do see enough of, is like people start off a mentorship, they fire off and they run out of steam soon because they're just not ready to really fully commit to that, or maybe realistically they're not mentally prepared to handle that feedback, constantly. Even, we do it politely and professionally, but like some people, like hearing that, like, hey, that you got to do this, it is mentally draining, and I'm fully aware of that because my clients mentally train me when I'm doing their feedback and their iterations and getting things that I need to have approved, right? It's a big circle. But yeah, no matter what out there, it's really just about getting those subtle areas improved. So like this is all Kane's work. Like when he was working with me, and it would just start really simple. Like, okay, in some instances, how are your designs? How your brush making? Can we make something really simple and mundane more interesting in the most subtle of ways? Just understanding design theory like lines, patterns, and rhythms. Or, do you have an idea, but you have access to the tools, but do you know a pipeline that could basically take something like this, which was at week 2, to something where you kind of ended up with on week 8? Something just like a little more sophisticated that involves a lot more planning and strategy, something that you'd have access to. Something like this. This was his first take on an interior of one of his building designs. And, through a couple sessions, just getting the feedback, discussing it, and talking strategy, he was able to turn it around and do something like a lot more thorough, a lot more in-depth, and a lot more designed, as a result of that. Because he listened. There's some people out there that really do have a resistance to taking feedback into consideration, and the growth just never is as strong. Josh Ash, he's a perfect one. Really came into every session super open-minded. He'd come up with some ideas and often enough had no problem whatsoever, almost like completely redesigning that idea to take it even in slightly new directions if necessary, or if he was even open to it. And that's part of the thing with I think a good mentorship or a class as well, is that you want to keep an eye out that people aren't just trying, or the teachers are trying not to make just carbon clones of themselves. Teaching only one way is the highway. I've never liked that approach. But it's about finding someone's like strength and what they're interested in. Like Elena's 2 illustrations, she wanted to do nice figure-based illustrations, but it's like, all right, like you have an idea, let's really work and grind out what you want to do with that idea, why you want to do it, and what that outcome could be. So we could basically do the same idea, but do it in a much more fleshed out, much more fully realized, sort of way. And a huge part of this whole process, of course, really is about breaking down and understanding a multitude of processes if necessary. Like here's just 3 breakdowns of just 3 random pieces I grabbed in mind, but just to illustrate how differently sometimes I will work and how much of flexibility I allow depending on what the outcome and what the goal is. So like I might just start with really rough value sketches. Then I might go into Blender, block it out, and then start painting over the block out, and maybe even use some photo textures. Other times maybe I'll start sketching in 3D, and then I'll basically paint a backdrop and then start to mishmash and even use the Oculus to sketch out some characters, in VR to implement and add the characters into the fully scene. So like sometimes a given picture may take 2 or 3 different software transitions, depending on what I want to do. For me, it's always about finding the path of least resistance. Okay, I'm starting here, almost at nothing. I want to do this with this idea, or I want to explore this particular workflow or plot, or I want to explore this workflow or process. What would be a logistical way for me to do it? And then I will grab a tutorial online, deconstruct what they're doing, and then try to implement it in my own work. So like when this one, right, like the title creature, I'm going to start off with a really quick color sketch. And then I'm going to go into Oculus and I'm going to sculpt all these little guys out. And then I'm going to basically cut all the little 3D cutouts and stick them into Blender and then overpaint them, because that can get me really good, consistent results. So whatever your desired outcome is, all you got to do is research and deconstruct on a step-by-step basis. How are they approaching line? How are they approaching color, texture? How do they approach their shape design? How are they addressing lighting in their scenes? Especially when it comes to marketing yourself toward prospective clients or studios. You would ask yourself, how does a studio approach these? Are they very realistic? Are they very stylized? Are they somewhere in the middle, right? You want to consider all these things when starting to build your portfolio and then later on tailoring it to fit your specific interests and outcomes. And so next up, is networking and networking for opportunities. This is a huge part about building a career and landing many roles, right? And part of that, starting your online presence, joining industry communities, and attending whatever events and workshops you possibly have access to. And I'm going to hopefully put a lot of information here out to give you some idea of what the opportunities are out there, because it's very common. It happened even this week. Someone that I work with, they had some opportunities that were presented to them, but they're of course way too busy, so that they'll start dropping their information down in Discord forums. Hey, I got this job, this is the requirements, this is the pay. If anyone knows anyone, or if you think you're good, just submit me your work. I see this all the time because I'm in very few art communities, but even the ones that I'm in and the ones that I run and operate, this is something that happens. Word of mouth referrals, a lot of these jobs are basically filled kind of on the back end in a communal aspect. That's why it's really good to work on your articulating skills, your ability to just talk with other artists, and to make connections with them, because you never know when it may serve you. Right? So there's a variety of places out there you could start looking for a sense of community. Like I know Polycount is out there for 3D artists. ArtStation is out there. They run challenges. It's a great way to kind of connect with others. There's various types of Discords, not just for game design communities, but for animation. Most big time, YouTube content creators, they're going to have Discords as well, which will have their own subset of communities. I know lots of people you jump around in between them. That's all great. There's groups in social media platform sites like LinkedIn, like Facebook's. I see jobs run through those sometimes as well. There's the blenderartist.org, which is kind of like all things 3D and for Blender. There's great sites and organizations like Women in Animation. You go to womeninanimation.org or .com. I forgot it's one of those. But, if you're a lady out there, there are great senses of community even for you guys. And then joining any kind of various online class. Of course, I'm a little biased because I do instruct at CGMA. We're starting up, next week. So feel free to click on the links below if you need any information on those. But I know a lot of students hook up, in these classes. They link up, they work on projects, and they build friendships that may last them a lifetime, from an online class. Again, that's part of what you're paying for with a class is not just the feedback, not just the curriculum, but the opportunity to connect with others, right? That's a huge thing. And then there's just, industry events. So I tried to get a good sample here for animation, for games, and ones that are available, of course, all over the world. So again, you could just think of what's kind of near to you. Some of these, they will jump countries. They will hold, various other places. But, there's CTN, that's a huge one, but that's in California. Lightbox, that's also out there in California, which is a great one. There's the Playgrounds, which is in the Netherlands. And I tried to put all the relevant information that when they'll be this coming year. So if you guys are attending any of these, I want to know below if you've tried to or if you want to. I haven't been to Lightbox Expo. I want to. I have to wait a bit longer till my kids are a bit older, and I don't have to basically be the father, every single day for them and be there for them. So my goal is to make it to Lightbox within a couple of years. I want to know what your goal is. I've been to CTN. That was the last one I went to before I had children, and basically made kind of long distance travel almost impossible for me right now. But yeah, there's digital art communities. There's this one. There's this one in Italy, right? View. Trojan Horse was a unicorn, or Tho, right? That's going to be held in Japan this year. That's a great one. There's GamesCon. There's a lot of things out here, but these are some of the big ones that, if they're anywhere near you or within your means, I would try to go there, establish as many connections, as you absolutely can. And lastly, today, I want to talk about job readiness and more on continuous improvement, right? So, part of this is preparing for applications. Are you ready for them? Are you not ready? Should you even do it? You could, of course, practice interviews, right? Anticipate the questions about your process, the challenges, your teamwork experience, of course, with that. But, and this will be covered a lot more in the next video, but a personalized growth plan. And of course, there are a few other things I want to touch upon before we get to that. So the first primarily being in preparation. This is what I would do. Find something like 5 companies, right? And you want to like their projects, of course. So if you like arcane stuff and League of Legends, you look at those companies. If you like really highly realistic narrative stuff, you look at a company toward that. Do you like big projects? Do you like small projects? But you want to consider what these companies are and if you think you could possibly align with them. So the first thing that comes to my mind is does their art aesthetically match yours? Do you create stuff of a similar style for similar genres? That would be the most surface level thing that makes sense. But when you look deeper into it, these are other important things to consider. Does their studio size and culture, how big is that? What does it look like? What kind of opportunities do they offer? What goes on at their facilities? Do they have a good reputation, right? More and more nowadays, companies are coming out doing really shady things. Ubisoft can't escape the news lately on that stuff and how they hire like these sweatshops, in like Indonesia to do like the bulk of their work. A lot of unethical things. So you want to look a little bit into that. What does their onboarding process look like? What kind of services do they offer? Do they only want to work remote? Do they want you to work, in person? If so, would they even help you relocate? Would they help you relocate abroad, even if necessary? And I have heard really amazing stories where individuals have been skilled enough or desirable enough to work with. Companies, of course, especially if a larger one, they have no problem like paying to relocate you, but they may do that on a certain fixed budget and limit, and they'll give you a certain amount of grace period to do so. But these are things you could look up and research. That's what the internet's for. Do they offer internships or apprenticeships? Do they have a mentor system built in to their studio from more senior level artists and creators? I know a lot of studios even offer something like that. As part of that onboarding process. And of course, are they accessible to your location? Are they within your country or are they not? Would they have a problem depending on what visa you have, for example? These are all things to consider. Generally, though, I'd say it's great to have those bigger end goal studios in mind, but there's absolutely no shame at all with actually starting with smaller studios, with smaller jobs, and then kind of work your way up as you build your reputation, as you refine, your portfolio. This is how my career path kind of went. I started off doing very small board game objects, covers for independent authors, and then was much later I started working on some bigger studio stuff. So of course having a little bit of patience and time to work things through is a huge part of that. Furthermore, consider how a company creates, of course, what kind of process do they utilize with what their artists are sharing or what they're even showing. What tools and software do you predict would help you create that same type of artwork? Do you need to know ZBrush? Do they rely heavily on Oculus and VR? Do they work really in Blender and have 3D ready assets, or are they just utilizing Unreal, the latest version of Unreal Engine? Are you expected to be able to perform within that software, for example? Because maybe you're just a 2D illustrator. Would they even need someone like you in their pipeline? That would be a big mismatch. So certainly consider what kinds of art someone needs and if you would fit naturally, of course, what that role is. And if not, do you want to make any shifts, intentionally? That's a big part of that. But depending on the studio sizes that you're targeting, of course, there's different expectations and different roles you could potentially fill. So with indie, usually you got to wear more than one cap, You're a bit more of a generalist on indie studios. Speaking from my experience only, of course. Mid-level, you get a little more focus. So maybe they got a character guy and maybe an environment guy. Maybe if you're really good, you could maybe do a little bit of both. And then the AAA, the bigger companies, they're going to have entire departments for each of those, right? So everything scales exponentially, of course. And I try to outline some of those differences so you guys can kind of see that there. And most of the time you're reporting to art directors or various art leads, like this one company I'm working for now. It's usually various art leads that I'm reporting to on a daily basis. And sometimes there's producers. In bigger cases, like I never even had to deal with creative directors and art directors. They never even kind of talk with them. It was always just been, people kind of leading and guiding some of the artists and the contractors. That's usually where I come in. I'm usually a bit of a contractor on these types of jobs. And they would manage me. And so, like, again, if you're even applying to a job, or if you're even fortunate enough to have an interview, you could say, like, what are we expected to do? How are we meeting up? What software are we doing? What are the expectations? And, how could I be the best service for you? But again, I'm getting a little bit derailed. If you guys think I should do additional videos on more of that hiring process and how to tackle interviews, let me know below. Maybe that's something I could work out in the pipeline. But yeah, here's just some general things for you guys to consider. So guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching this series. Again, if you're new here, go back, watch some of the 3 or 4 videos leading up to this. If you have suggestions and want to know more about specific things, let me know below as well so I can incorporate them in the future parts of this series. And thanks again to Magic Mind for help making these videos possible with their sponsorships. Go to magicmind.com and use the code Tyler EJAN to save 45% off today. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.